Prince Harry's world collapses as Queen Elizabeth's long-buried warning suddenly resurfaces, exposing how Meghan Markle's push for independence, media battles, and high-stakes decisions stripped away his protection, his status, and the life he once assumed was guaranteed. This is the moment Harry realizes the true cost of choosing freedom. The day the Queen's warning resurfaced, and Harry realized the cost. Outside the royal courts of justice, Prince Harry stepped into the cold air looking shattered, his voice cracking as he admitted he was pretty gutted after losing his fight for full UK police protection. It was the moment everything finally hit him. His royal status, once protected by tradition and duty, no longer carried the automatic shield he grew up relying on. And suddenly, the memory of a quiet warning from Queen Elizabeth II in 2020 came roaring back. Back then, during the tense Sandringham summit, she had told him clearly that there was no such thing as being half in, half out. If he chose independence, the institution would not carry him. Now, standing outside the High Court, he was living the full weight of that decision. Courtiers and commentators quietly connected the dots. Years of commercial deals, public criticism of the monarchy, and a life built around global visibility had pushed Harry far outside the framework the Queen once controlled. Even Prince William was said to believe the consequences were inevitable. And in the background sat Meghan, supportive, determined, but often blamed for accelerating the path that led here. As Harry walked away from the courthouse, it wasn't the ruling that broke him. It was the realization that Diana's safety net could no longer shield him, and the Queen's quiet warning had become his new reality. A shift he can't undo, and the beginning of losses still to come. Diana's safety net, and how Meghan's world pulled Harry outside its protection. When Princess Diana, Princess of Wales, died, the inheritance she left behind was built to protect her sons quietly, not publicly. It grew into roughly £10 million for Harry by the time he turned 30, structured through careful trustees and long-term investments meant to support a prince living inside the royal framework. His housing, staff, and official security were expected to come from the palace. Diana's money was simply the extra layer she hoped would keep him safe for life. But that design only works in a world of stability, and Harry's world no longer resembles the one Diana planned for. After moving to Montecito, he entered a life where income comes from visibility, where safety must be purchased privately, and where every decision carries public scrutiny. The inheritance that once sat quietly in the background now funds security teams, legal fights, and the cost of living independently from the crown. Meghan's approach, open interviews, global platforms, commercial storytelling, didn't destroy the inheritance, but it changed the environment around it. What was once a shield became exposed capital. What once required silence now sits in the middle of noise. By 2021, Harry openly acknowledged that Diana's money kept them afloat after stepping back. For the first time, the safety net was not supporting a prince. It was supporting an entire new life. And in that shift, Harry begins to realize something painful. Diana built protection for a world he no longer lives in and cannot return to. The Queen's original warning: you can't be half in, half out. Inside the stillness of Sandringham, the Queen listened as Harry tried to explain a future where he and Meghan could balance royal duty with global independence. He believed it was a modern solution. She knew it was an impossible compromise. When she finally said the words, "You can't be half in, half out," her tone carried the weight of a lifetime spent protecting the institution. It wasn't rejection. It was a line history required her to draw. From that moment, the shift was set in motion. The Queen understood that leaving the inner circle meant stepping away from everything that quietly guarded him: the security, the staff, the inherited structure that had always stood between him and the world. Harry didn't yet see how fragile those protections were outside the royal system. But she did. Once the decision moved to Reykjavik, it became a matter of procedure rather than emotion. Harry felt the door closing, but what he didn't realize was that the Queen's words were never meant as punishment. They were a map of what would come. Independence would cost him more than he imagined. Months later, as Harry stepped out of the High Court after losing his security appeal, the message finally settled in. The Queen hadn't been warning him about loyalty. She had been warning him about consequences. A life beyond the monarchy demanded sacrifices he hadn't prepared for. Her warning had been a shield, not a rebuke, a rare moment of royal foresight offered with quiet wisdom. Meghan's vision versus Diana's design, turning pain into content. From the moment Meghan stepped into the royal spotlight, her instinct was to reclaim the narrative. Silence, she believed, only empowers those who twist the truth. So when the world felt hostile, she leaned into visibility, interviews, documentaries, and personal storytelling. To her, voice was survival. But to those who understood how Diana built Harry's future, it was a quiet unraveling of a system meant to protect him in ways he couldn't yet see. Diana had crafted a life where her son's emotional and financial safety sat behind palace walls, shielded by discretion. The trust she left Harry wasn't built for a public battlefield. It was designed for a son who would remain close to the institution's protective net. Meghan, however, came from a world where protection was earned through openness, not silence. The clash between those philosophies was subtle at first, a media strategy here, a documentary pitch there, until suddenly it became the only path forward for the couple. Netflix, podcasts, memoirs, they turned the pain of royal life into global content. And each time Harry stepped forward to speak, the gap grew wider between the legacy Diana imagined and the life he was now choosing. Emotional truth had replaced quiet continuity. In Meghan's eyes, she was helping him reclaim his identity. But in the structure Diana left behind, the more public he became, the less protected he was. Visibility built their brand, but it weakened the shield Diana created out of love. Royal inheritance, generational memory, public exposure, and fragile trust. From palace payroll to paying his own bills, Harry's financial flip. When Harry stepped back from royal life, he didn't just lose a title, he lost an entire infrastructure he'd never had to question. For decades, the rhythm of his life was shaped by an invisible system. Homes maintained by palace staff, security coordinated without discussion, travel arranged with a single call. It wasn't luxury to him, it was normal. But that normal vanished the moment he chose independence. Suddenly, the world had price tags. The move to Montecito came with a mortgage he now had to manage himself. The property's vast grounds required private teams, not palace personnel. And the 24/7 security he once assumed was guaranteed became a bill so large it startled even those close to him. Diana's trust, once meant to be a quiet buffer, became working capital, spent not on comfort, but on protection. At the same time, legal wars piled up, phone hacking cases, media challenges, and the bitter fight over UK security. Each filing came with another invoice. Each court appearance pulled him deeper into financial independence he never expected to need. The palace wasn't paying anymore. The duchy wasn't covering anything. Harry was now a man funding a life most royals never have to survive alone. Meghan understood this world. She had lived in the uncertainty of freelance careers and contracts. Harry had not. And as deals rose and deals collapsed, as Spotify ended and Netflix demanded more, the truth settled in. The shield of royal support, institutional stability, inherited privilege, protected status, and lifelong certainty was gone. Locked out of royal protection, the security battle, Harry lost. When the ruling finally came down in the High Court, Harry felt something he hadn't expected: finality. The judge's words made it clear that the system he once relied on no longer saw him as someone entitled to automatic protection. It wasn't personal, it was procedural. But to Harry, it felt like the last door closing. For years, he believed he could rebuild a bridge back to the security he had as a working royal. Now, the verdict confirmed what the Queen had once warned. Stepping away meant losing far more than a role. He had argued that his threats hadn't changed, that his public profile remained high, that Diana's fate still haunted every decision he made. But Ravek saw something else: a private citizen choosing to live abroad. The palace could no longer guarantee what the state declined to provide. And Harry couldn't buy back what had once been his birthright. This ruling didn't just alter logistics, it altered his relationship with Britain. He admitted he couldn't bring Meghan and the children home without proper protection. That meant birthdays missed, family events avoided, and a widening gap between him and the world he grew up in. Security was no longer a given. It was a negotiation he had lost. In that moment, the weight of his new life settled sharply. Royal entitlement, institutional access, unquestioned safety, inherited privilege, and even maternal legacy were no longer part of his reality. Rift with Charles and William, when love and loyalty pull in different directions. What broke inside the family didn't happen overnight. It happened in moments, small at first, then seismic. The Oprah interview, the Netflix series, Spare, each step widened a gap that had once been bridged by shared grief, private jokes, and the unspoken bond of two brothers raised in Diana's shadow. But once Harry chose to speak publicly, the palace chose silence. Yes. And silence in the royal world isn't absence, it's strategy. Charles watched decades of careful rebuilding crumble as global headlines painted him as distant, unfeeling, even complicit in the pain Harry described. William watched his own reputation pulled into a storm he never wanted, as stories of arguments and a broken kitchen dog bowl echoed through the press. What hurt them most wasn't the content, it was the finality. Harry had taken their private world and placed it on a global stage. There was no undoing that. When Charles asked Harry and Meghan to vacate Frogmore Cottage, it wasn't just a logistical decision, it was a symbolic one. Frogmore had been their last foothold in the UK, the last trace of a life where compromise still felt possible. Losing it meant losing a home, but it also meant losing the sense that reconciliation was just a conversation away. Tensions grew sharper when reports emerged of Charles being unable to meet Harry during UK visits. William kept his distance, protective of his family and wary of further leaks. Not because he didn't love his brother, but because he no longer knew which conversations would stay private. Inside this emotional fracture, Meghan became Harry's primary guide. Her instinct, defend, speak, clarify. The palace's instinct, contain, silence, endure. And Harry was caught between two worlds, his wife's fire and his family's frost, until the space between them felt impossible to cross. By the time the dust settled, Harry realized the true cost wasn't financial. It was the erosion of royal family, inherited trust, sacred privacy, institutional loyalty, and childhood brotherhood. Things far harder to rebuild than titles or roles. Did Meghan really cost him everything? Facts versus rumor. The story the world tells about Harry and Meghan is often louder than the truth. Every setback, every contract change, every family distance becomes a headline claiming Meghan cost Harry everything. But the real picture is far more complicated and far more human. Yes, Harry lost the privileges that once shaped his daily life, the automatic security, the royal base, the quiet influence that comes from proximity to the crown. But none of that vanished with one decision or one woman. It happened through years of choices, pressures, and a system that does not bend for those who step outside it. Meghan didn't craft the rules that removed Harry's protection. Those were drawn long before she appeared. She didn't decide how the monarchy views independence. The Queen did. What Meghan did was offer Harry a different kind of life, one built on openness instead of silence, action instead of endurance. For some, that shift looks like destruction. For Harry, it looked like survival. Yet the consequences are undeniable. With each interview, each documentary, each chapter of Spare, the bridge back to the institution grew weaker. Not because Meghan engineered it, but because Harry chose honesty over tradition. And honesty inside a monarchy comes with a price. Rumors twist that into a simpler tale. Meghan the destroyer, Harry the lost prince. But the truth is subtler. She became the lightning rod for everything the institution could not confront. Public pain, modern expectations, shifting identities. In the end, Harry did not lose everything. But he did lose the comfort of royal certainty, inherited status, institutional support, generational stability, and unquestioned belonging. What he gained, whether freedom or isolation, is the question your viewers must decide for themselves. The Queen's warning versus Diana's prophecy. Two women who saw this coming. Long before Harry ever thought about leaving the royal fold, two women saw the cracks forming. The Queen saw them through the lens of duty. Diana saw them through the lens of emotion. And both, in their own ways, warned him about what would happen if he stepped outside the structure built to protect him. At Sandringham, the Queen made her message unshakably clear. There was no such thing as a hybrid role, no safe halfway point where Harry could be both independent and institutionally protected. To her, the monarchy survived because its rules were firm, not flexible. If he walked out, the walls that once shielded him would not follow. Diana, meanwhile, had spent years fighting the cold edges of that same system. She felt its silence, its rigidity, its inability to handle vulnerability. In private letters and interviews, she worried about how her boys would navigate a world where public eyes were constant and compassion was scarce, where visibility could become danger, where a good heart could be weaponized. Harry grew up holding both truths without knowing it. The Queen warned of practical consequences. Diana warned of emotional ones. And when he finally stepped away with Meghan, both warnings came to life at once. The loss of royal protection, the strain on family unity, the collapse of inherited tradition, the need for emotional freedom, and the burden of public scrutiny were no longer predictions. They were his daily reality. Love versus legacy, what Harry has left, and the price he paid. By the time the storm settled around him, Harry found himself standing between two worlds he could no longer join. The royal life behind him was built on duty, hierarchy, and quiet endurance. A life where everything was arranged, secured, and decided long before he stepped into the room. The new life ahead of him was built on storytelling, independence, and emotional honesty. A life where every choice carried a cost, and every word carried a consequence. Between those worlds stood Meghan, the woman he chose, and the monarchy, the world that raised him. And for the first time, he understood that choosing one would mean losing parts of the other forever. In California, he discovered something unfamiliar: the weight of true freedom. Freedom to speak, freedom to refuse, freedom to build a home that felt like his own. But freedom came with bills, headlines, and battles he never imagined he'd fight alone. Diana's money helped, but it couldn't rebuild what he left behind. The Queen's boundaries made sure of that, and so Harry learned that love can rescue and unravel at the same time, giving him purpose while taking him far from the system that once defined him. Yet, what he gained mattered too. He became a father who could choose his children's environment, a husband who could defend his wife, a man who could name his pain without fear of palace disapproval. The cost was steep, but the reward was real. Still, the losses lingered. Royal identity, generational belonging, institutional protection, inherited authority, and unquestioned status. These were things no Netflix deal could replicate, no memoir could reclaim, no interview could repair. And so the question your video ends on is the one Harry now lives with. Did he walk away from everything for love? Or did he finally choose the one life where he could breathe? Even if it meant giving up the crown-shaped safety net he was born into, Harry paid the price. The Queen's warning proved painfully true.